From leaving Caladan to Paul's Gom Jabbar test and the Jamis knife fight, there are many scenes in Denis Villeneuve's Dune that in my opinion stand out as being classic science fiction sequences. But after 3 watches of the film in IMAX, one scene has stood out the most with its merging of visual storytelling, thumping sound design, and narrative progression and meaning. The particular scene I'm talking about is the Spice Harvester one, a sequence that since reading the book I have anticipated seeing on the big screen. It's a moment of sci-fi grandeur that makes many sci-fi effects today look pale in comparison, and more importantly, it communicates some of the film's crucial aspects. In this video, I'm going to be discussing why the Spice Harvester scene in Denis Villeneuve's Dune is a perfect moment for the film and the journey of Paul Atreides. But before I get into it, if you want to keep up to date on any of my future content on Dune 2021, then don't forget to support this video by giving it a like rating, subscribing to the channel, and turning on your notifications. Also, feel free to check me out on Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Instagram at Cortex Videos, which is all linked in the description below. But without further ado, let's dive into the perfect scene from Dune. The adaptation of Frank Herbert's Dune by Denis Villeneuve is a film that is gigantic, especially with its sweeping desert cinematography and colossal forces on display. But like with his other films, Blade Runner 2049 primarily in mind, the filmmaker is one of the rare in Hollywood to capture such a big sense of the intimacy with the story he's adapting, while at the same time using the mammoth-like sets and locations as essentially references to his characters. I could do a whole video on scenes like the Gom Jabbar sequence, the visual use of hands in multiple scenes such as the Leaving Caladan one, and like I've discussed already, with the ending fight and the bigger meaning of that. But one particular scene which strongly captures this essence, and probably my favourite at doing so in the film, is the Spice Harvester one. Throughout the film, the desert is used by its practical and metaphorical meaning, in that it's land that doesn't support the occupying being. They have to adapt and fight to survive. During the events of the Spice Harvester moment, Paul Atreides has his first encounter with Spice and the sandworms, who in the film are used in a Jaws-esque way, where the creature is slowly unveiled and mentioned throughout the film. And when it comes to the spice, the substance Paul and his family have been put in charge of producing, we know of the immense power that lies on the planet Arrakis, while also recognising why the harsh landscape has taken so many before them. This scene is a pinnacle one from the book, and when I read it for the first time a few years ago, it really captured my imagination towards how this could be brought to the big screen today. And seeing that unfold alongside Denis Villeneuve's mastery of it is quite breathtaking. It was in this moment that I realised that what the filmmaker had said about Dune and its theatrical capability was completely correct. Many had said that the book was unfilmable, but Denis had said that bringing Dune to the big screen successfully was about capturing the visual memory of reading the book, presenting us with a film that through its merging of images and sounds captures the feeling of cinema in the most awe-inspiring way possible. And the Spice Harvester scene completely demonstrates the film's approach in doing this. When watching this moment unfold, we have to mention the astounding visual mastery that Denis and his team have pulled off. What was crucial to do in this scene from a visual standpoint was make the audience feel the scale of the sandworm, the legendary creature that had been teased and discussed throughout the first act. When it comes to the worms and a lot of elements in the film, everything was designed based on the already pre-sketched concept art, and the worms themselves were a huge task to pull off. With his artists and production designer, he spent a lot of time working out the size of the worms, the texture of their skin, and the amount of force they needed to navigate through the massive amounts of sand. It was a big inspiration for many creatures and props in science fiction, but it was clear that the director and his team wanted to construct something that felt original and enormously terrifying for the big screen, especially in IMAX. The final look that they decided on and also revealed in the Harvester sequence was quite prehistoric. The sandworm is full of scales and strikes you with its jaws, moving almost like a sea creature under the surface of the sand. When creating the worm digitally, producing their texture, animation, and applying it to the frame, what we ultimately get in this scene is a sense of the key defining elements that Paul Atreides and many other characters deal with in the film. We see them having to react and eventually adapt to the world of Arrakis, and in this scene, the jolting presence of the sandworm. The whole film is mostly Paul adapting to the planet, and this fully comes into focus after the final knife fight at the end. But leading up to that, it's the very human moments of survival and a growing understanding that make the Spice Harvester scene become that much more important. It's not just special effects and visual genius, it's a pure moment of character evolution as he is thrusted into contact with the sandworms and Spice. But alongside the visual meaning of this work, it is crucial to acknowledge creating the essence of realism through practical filming, and especially the musical evolution on display with Hans Zimmer's fantastic score. Starting with the filming, Villeneuve explained how this scene included aspects from 2 locations, and he had to match them up to make it all fit together seamlessly. The ground shots that we see in the film were shot in Jordan, a location that fit the bill for the cleanest sand dunes with the right height, but they would also work with the areas that were filmed in another location. And that other footage was the filming that took place in the air as the characters in the ornithopter scout one of the harvesters. This behind-the-scenes image shows how they brought in vehicles and artillery to function as part of the harvester, and they did the same with helicopters, using their movement as bases to what would become the ornithopter. There were also huge wind machines being used on set to thrust the sand at the actors in the scene, meaning that the filming of Dune's production is a brilliant combination of work on the actual landscape and above the ground, with a focus on mainly the actors and not stunt doubles. Getting the right cast and crew together is of course only one element of making this work though. Excruciatingly, they had to make sure that things such as the colour of the sky and the movement of the wind fit these different types of shots from both locations. They were able to get this right with a lot of hard work, achieving the white, dreamlike skies and force of wind that made the filming successful despite the numerous challenges they had to overcome. It was all about producing an unbelievable cinematic experience, and while there was little dialogue in a scene like this, everything has a big sense of purpose, which we immediately notice once the spice hits Paul for the first time and he starts to get a much greater sense of his visions. A sequence such as the Spice Harvester one is a Rubik's Cube to bring to the big screen, with technically complex elements to pull off, but it's all worth it as one that relies on showcasing everything important about the film through a moment of pure cinema. When it comes to the filming of this very cinematic scene, the director had explained that it's one of his proudest moments while shooting this first film. He said that he wishes he could show Frank Herbert what he had done with the famous words, and it's one which perfectly communicates the feelings of Paul, who steps out in the desert for the first time, having those feelings of illusion. It's a desert that he has seen before, and a place that he also feels comfortable with. The scene is further Paul's first experience breathing in the spice, which not only heightens his own sense of the visions, but also sets him on a path for clarity, where he sees a version of his future in a more striking way than ever before. This is only heightened by the genius use of editing in a following scene, where we go back to that moment to see the visions Paul actually had while he was on the sand. And after Paul manages to escape and the sandworms swallow the spice harvester, the audience finally sees one of these beasts for the first time, demonstrating how the film is on a size like no other. It's the perfect example of combining scope with the intimate experience of science fiction. But the other factor behind creating this balanced imagining of the famous sequence comes through Hans Zimmer's score and how he's able to communicate the messages and feelings of the scene through sound. The YouTuber Thomas Flights did a wonderful video discussing Hans Zimmer's approach to sound and how 3 particular moments, including the Spice Harvester one, echo this using reoccurring notes for each of the characters in different scenes to communicate the evolution of that person. I'll link the video in the description, and I'd recommend watching it to get a greater sense of how Zimmer's score elevated the visual images, such as with the Spice Harvester one. But when Paul's theme is used in this moment, there is no distortion and you hear the emotion in every note played. It's more at ease and less like the pounding version we hear of this music during, say, the Leaving Caladan scene. And it's more of a transition into the version we hear at the very end of the film, which is more of a combination between Paul's theme and the Fremen music. Like Thomas mentioned in his video, this is to communicate that Paul has now arrived and become familiar with his new home in the deep desert. His character is evolving and emotionally reacting to seeing the sandworm for the first time, and being quite obviously affected by the spice that has been blown all over him. The music essentially changes throughout the film to communicate the feelings of Paul at a given moment. It is as much a storytelling device as the images and dialogue are, and the harvester scene is one right in the middle of the film that makes that clearer to the audience, alongside just showing us the immense power that a moment like this can bring to the big screen. It's world-building sounds that reflect the world on screen, and this was the dream for Denis. To make this film feel like it had fully placed you on another planet, making the audience attempt to adapt to the world just as Paul and Lady Jessica have to. It does so by not using every line of dialogue from the book, but instead translating them to show us the spiritual notions rather than tell us. That's what cinema and especially adaptations can do so effectively when they're done right, and the Spice Harvester scene is really cinema at its most boldest, and at the same time, cinema that is refined. But that was my video discussing my favourite scene from Denis Villeneuve's Dune. It's one which, like I said, perfectly communicates the transitioning of Paul's journey as a character, and one which at the same time gives us all the visual grandeur and sonic audio that the film pushes throughout its 2.5-hour runtime. It's moments in science fiction like this which can do all the right things at once within a particular story, and not just one or the other. Balancing a character's journey and reactionary feelings in a scene while heavily focusing on a moment of action is a hard thing to write as a scriptwriter, because you've got to communicate all these elements through lines of action scripting. There's not too much dialogue, yet it gives us all of the messages that were discussed before, doing so in such a seamless way. I think this scene will go down as a classic one in sci-fi filmmaking, and it only builds my excitement towards how Denis and his team will capture the sandworms in Dune Part 2, where there will be a lot more footage of them, and in particular, we'll see even more of their full scale. It's probably my favourite sci-fi scene that marriages visuals, audio and meaning since the docking scene in Interstellar back in 2014, and I can only imagine how they will go about filming sequences like the Water of Life scene in Part 2. We'll have to see, but what do you think towards the Spice Harvester scene in Dune, and do you agree that it is one of the standout moments from Denis Villeneuve's adaptation? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, alongside your favourite scenes from the film. For more breakdown videos on Denis Villeneuve's Dune, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.